Namibia. So we want to have a zebra style. So ladies, please, don't be shy. Let the women also join us in terms of the Q&A. Just name an organization.
Sorry that there has to be another guy asking a question. Okay, I'm Jan Barends-Kiepers. I'm with Innosun Energy Holdings and also an associate member with the Economic Association. Quickly, just from a, okay, to Mr. White. Inequality, to an extent, is, a lot of people say, is unavoidable. So I want to almost ask, what would you say is a way of determining whether there is an acceptable amount of inequality? And I think it kind of touches on what you said, that obviously if there is a large chunk of that inequality that is falling under poverty, that is definitely unacceptable. But also there is, and in the case of Namibia, obviously if there's not an equality of opportunity, that is also unacceptable, which is obvious to be the case in Namibia with our historical disadvantage and so on. But I just wanted to know what sort of, how do we know when you actually have reached a suitable inequality? Because you'll never get it flat in a free market economy. And just maybe as a, one thing maybe is a Pareto distribution that I've recently heard of. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. And just for everyone, it's a mathematical thing saying that in any creative system, the square root of the members in it will have half of the resources. So in other words, if you have 100 people, almost always the distribution will over time tend to have half of the wealth sit in 10 people's hands. So I just wanted you maybe to comment on that. Thank you.
Well, I'll start with that one, which is that I hadn't actually heard that the Pareto rule applied to ownership of resources. So I'm not, I can't comment on that. But to your first question, when have you got too much inequality? I think you actually suggested the answer that I'm going to give, which is that I don't think it's the amount, the degree of inequality that's the issue, it's the source of it. If some people are poor because they have been denied equal rights, they don't have an equal right to education or to participate in the economy, let's say, for example, apartheid was a very clear example of that, then then the inequality there is the result of an injustice, and it's objectionable, and most people find it highly objectionable, and they would want to get rid of those injustices that lead to it. Now, if you have a society in which there are no such injustices, where everybody's got an equal shot, let's say, at success, then you will get some amount of inequality as a result of what you might call normal market processes and normal inequalities in what you're born with in life and so on. But I don't see that as if it's brought about in a free way where nobody's got any legal privilege, then it's just a consequence of voluntary action, and it's not something to lament. I also agree with you, and that was the whole point of my talk, that poverty in itself is a terrible thing and needs to be addressed. But if some people end up with much more for one reason or another, provided it's got in a fair and just way, then I don't think you can say that's too much in advance. Right? It's just whatever it is. I mean, some people nowadays are fabulously wealthy. And Bezos, what's he worth? Something extraordinary, like 100 billion or something. He got it fair and square.
Can I say just a quick one? I'll probably agree with Dr. White to say it's probably maybe not really what level of equality is acceptable or not acceptable, but rather to make sure that people are given equal opportunity actually to have a fair chance of being successful. And I also don't agree when we talk about redistributing wealth as a means to address inequality. It may work in the short run, but I think for me, really in the long run, it's just to make sure that everybody has got equal opportunity actually to do what their ability says they can do. And that's what we don't always give people. Now, either it's because in terms of education, because now I come from a poor background and therefore I cannot have a good education, or simply just to have, an opportunity to do something, a job opportunity, for example. But if we just eliminate whatever bottlenecks we have in giving people fair opportunities, I think in the long run that's probably the best way to address inequalities. With regard to the people who already become rich, you mentioned Bezos, you can think of the Bill Gates. Those guys made tons and tons of money. I always ask myself, yes, maybe they made it in a fair way, but how fair is that really to say one person who was working with other people to do whatever they did, to sell whatever product they did sell, but you have one individual who end up having billions and the others having millions. I mean, to me, it's still things like, and those are some of the things I was saying, we then look up to those people who make money, and such that they got so much money, then they start, oh, we're going to give it away to some other people who didn't have. I keep thinking, why didn't you actually give the money to the people who were working with you at the time when you're doing the money, making the money? To wait until you have got much of it, and then to say, I want to give it to charities. So, and if we do not really address some of this the way we have come to accept that there's a right way to do it, I mean, the inequality thing will always be ever there, because the inequality is just in terms of how much does the toppest or the highest guy has got and the lowest guy has got. But if we're all going to continue to really admire people who made so much money in a fair way, as you want to say, I don't see we're actually going to address the issue of inequality as we're going forward. It's a concept that I think we need really to think about it, and how fair is it?
I think quite an interesting statistics also shared last night on one of the news networks was that Jeff Bezos makes about $8 million an hour. And there's sweatshop workers that work at Amazon in the warehouses get $13 an hour. So it's quite a very interesting disparity in terms of the amount of wealth sitting in one hand compared to the people that are helping to create that wealth. But that's some of the things that we want to be unpacked today. We've got another question here in front. And another one there. Oh,
thank you.
in front, yeah.
My name is Salome Ivenga. I work for the Ministry of Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare. I have a question going to Mr. Whitey. In his speech, he indicated that one of the ways we can break inequality is by giving our children quality education. But then I was also touched by a point that he made to say quality educations, or rather private education, gives more quality education than the state's education. I'm one of those people that believe that, because for me, my kids, they can go to a public school, because I believe that it's within the individual teachers that they can, they believe in education, and therefore they can bring quality education. I don't want to walk out here believing that maybe I need to take my child from the public school to take to a private school because that's where quality education is. My comment rather is, how do we ensure that public schools bring about quality education? Because he indicated that it's an issue of accountability. So how do we make teachers or whoever is involved in education to ensure that we bring about quality education in public schools? Thank you.
It's very difficult to do that, because the way the way you get improved quality in private sector, in private companies in general, not just schools, is that if they don't do a very good job, nobody wants to buy their product, and they go broke, and they're eliminated. If they do a good job, people do want to buy their product, they expand, other people mimic them, and you get this process of trial and error, a success and failure, and progress is made in that way. When something is supplied by the state, it doesn't really matter if it's education or train rides or aeroplanes or whatever it is. That process isn't in place. So if there are no real customers, because they don't pay, they just go to the allocated school. If they don't like it, they don't really have any choice in the matter, and the school will persist even if it's not doing a very good job, they have no incentive to try new ways of teaching or new formats that might be superior because there's no profit motive. And so it relies on what you might call relies on the goodwill of those involved in the process. And if they even if they do have the best will, they don't get eliminated if they're doing a bad job. So I actually think it touches a little on this point about leadership. It requires heroic participants. And the market system doesn't require heroic participants because it eliminates the bad ones and promotes the good ones, whether they're virtuous or not. And so I think that's why it's very difficult to have a high-quality state-supplied anything, actually, including education. There are some, in Singapore as an example, where you've actually have quite good education supplied by the state. But there are some specific reasons for that. I'm sorry if that sounds a bit negative and depressing, but that is my view on the matter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kevin. I'm a writer with a Villager newspaper. My question is to the both of you. Quite interesting that we are having this discussion and debate when we have left-wing politics mainstreaming the discussion around expropriation of land. But definitely this is, of course, in pursuit of reaching that state of equality where maybe those that have and those that do not have, the gap at least is narrowed. But in the context of Namibia, I mean, having seen the examples of countries like Cuba, Zimbabwe, for instance, countries that have expropriated land without compensation and then having to suffer economic stagnation after that. Do you think that this is the path that we need to take? And if it is the path, how best do we navigate this stormy weather as we go ahead?
Shoot from the hip, sir.
Was it to me or to Dr. White?
Was that to both?
I would not rather want to talk about the land issue now that we are going to have a land conference coming up in a couple of weeks. So why don't we just wait until that happens?
Can I just briefly say, I'm not sufficiently familiar with the history of Namibia to talk about this, but I could talk about New Zealand, my home country, in which there has been a process of restoring property to Maori tribes. Maori, for those of you who don't know, are the indigenous New Zealand population. And New Zealand has a good history in this regard. In 1848, there was basically the founding treaty of New Zealand called the Treaty of Waitangi, in which the Maori tribes were given legal ownership of their land under British law. They were happy